The train pulled away with a groaning hiss, kicking dust into the face of the woman left behind. Her gloved hand clutched a worn satchel tighter, knuckles pale under the lace. She didn't cry, at least not yet. Crying would mean she still believed someone might turn back for her. But the station was empty now, save for the wind and the few locals watching from a distance, murmuring with narrowed eyes and upturned lips. Bella Mayfield stood still as the last echo of the engine disappeared into the hills. She was a wide woman, and the fullness of her figure seemed to catch the sunlight unfairly, casting longer shadows than most. Her pale lavender dress strained at the seams, pressed and careful despite the long journey. She had chosen that color because the catalog said it softened round faces. But even the color couldn't hide the fact she was alone, abandoned at a dusty stop that reeked of tobacco, heat, and disappointment. No one came for her. Not the man who had written 6 eager letters. Not the man who said he didn't mind her size, only her honesty. He wasn't here. Not with flowers, not with a ring, not with decency. She shifted her trunk beside the bench, the wood groaning under its weight. It was a borrowed piece from her aunt, painted sky blue, and now chipped all over. A woman of softer pride might have begged to ride to the nearest inn, but Bella sat rigid, watching, breathing. 2 young boys tumbled off a nearby freight cart, muddy and wildeed, their laughter shrill in the dry air. One chased the other until he nearly tripped over her trunk. He stumbled, paused, then squinted at her. She met his eyes with quiet poise. Her mother always said kindness didn't have to be loud. The boy tilted his head. "You the new school teacher?" "No," Bellstar answered softly. "I was supposed to be someone's bride." The boy blinked unsure. "He late?" Bellstar didn't smile. "No, sweetheart. He's not coming." A deeper voice joined them. "Ben, don't pester the lady." The man approaching looked like he carried whole winters in his eyes. Rough coat, dust-covered boots, a strong square jaw beneath a mess of dark stubble. He wasn't dressed like a rancher with something to prove. He was just a man trying to stay upright in a world that didn't care if he fell. Boom. "Carter." He tipped his hat politely. "Ma'am, sir." The boy darted back to the wagon with his brother. Boone lingered. "You need a ride somewhere? I don't suppose you know a Mr. Langley Carver?" Bellstar's voice tried to sound casual, though her fingers gripped the satchel tighter. Boone shook his head. "No Carvers around here. Not that I'd trust anyone named Langley with much." A tight laugh broke from her lips, bitter and raw. "Well, I trusted him with my future. Foolish me." He lowered his voice. "You come all this way on your own?" Bellstar nodded once. 3 trains, 1 stagecoach, 2 months of letters, 1 broken promise. He didn't offer hollow words. Just looked at her with a kind of silence that didn't rush to fix things. Bellstar appreciated that. It was a silence that let pain breathe. "My name's Boone Carter," he said finally. "I got a farm up north, 2 boys, a good horse, and an old roof that needs patching before rain season. Wasn't planning on picking up anything more today than nails and flour. And yet here we are," Bellstar said. He nodded. "You planning to wait long, Miss Mayfield?" "Bellstar Mayfield." He smiled. It was small, unsure. "Miss Mayfield. Bellstar will do under the circumstances." "All right, Bellstar." She met his eyes and found no judgment in them. Just tiredness and something else. Respect perhaps, or recognition. Like 2 people who had both been slapped by the same cruel wind. "Do you have anywhere to go?" he asked. "No, I see." He didn't speak again for a while. The wind picked up, blowing grit across the boards beneath their feet. "My wife passed 2 winters ago," he said eventually. "Influenza took her fast. Left me with 2 boys and a mule that bites." Bellstar folded her hands on her lap. Unsure where he was going with this, "I tried to get help. Neighbors, kin. No one sticks around long when the work's backbreaking and there's nothing sweet to come home to." He looked toward the general store. Boys need a woman's voice in the house. Someone steady. Someone who's not afraid of hard things. Bellstar stared at him. "I'm not offering pity," Boone said quickly. "You look like a woman who's had enough of that." Her jaw clenched. I'm offering you a name, a place, a chance to be something more than what that coward left behind. You're asking me to marry you? Her voice barely escaped her throat. Not asking. I'm putting it plain. You don't have to say yes. She blinked. You don't know me. I seen enough in 5 minutes. You didn't cry when he left you. You sat straight. Held your pride even when your world cracked. Bellstar looked away. I wanted to cry, but you didn't. His sons waved from the wagon. Bellstar followed Boone's gaze. You be mother to those boys. I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. She should have laughed at him, called him desperate, but something in her heart stirred. Some broken place that flickered like kindling meeting a spark. Boone didn't look like a man who offered things lightly. He didn't look like a man who needed saving. Just one willing to share his ruin with another. I'm not thin, she said finally. I'm not blind. I've been told I'm too much. I've been told I'm not enough. They stood in silence again, the world waiting with them. You got a preacher in this town? Bellstar asked, voice low. Boone smiled. He owes me 2 favors and a coat. That should count for something. She stood smoothing her dress with shaking hands. Then let's get it over with before I come to my senses. He offered her his arm. She hesitated before taking it. Bellstar Mayfield, he said as they walked toward the chapel. I reckon today was meant to break you, but I don't see anything broken standing beside me. Her throat caught. You're either the kindest man I've met or the most foolish. Can't I be both? She laughed then truly, and the sound startled even herself. Boone led her past gawking townsfolk, past murmurs and judgment. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows behind them, the kind that always come before a storm or a salvation. Bellstar didn't know which waited for her ahead, but at least she wouldn't be walking into it alone. The wooden chapel smelled of wax and old wood, its windows rattling in the wind as if they too were unsure of the vows being spoken inside. Bellstar stood beside Boone with her hands clasped, fingers white at the knuckles. The preacher, a round man with rheumy eyes and a hat 2 sizes too large, rattled off the words as though performing a blessing on a stubborn horse, and not 2 strangers stitching their lives together with raw thread and fast knots. Boone's boys stood nearby, one clutching a fist full of prairie daisies, the other chewing on his thumb with suspicious eyes. They didn't quite understand what was happening, only that their father had spoken in the same tone he used when mending fences in a storm, firm and final. Bellstar repeated the vows in a voice that wavered only once. When the preacher said, "Do you take this man?" she hesitated, just a breath. But Boone didn't flinch. He only looked at her with eyes that didn't judge, didn't pity, just waited. That stillness steadied her, and she said, "I do." Not as a surrender, but as a choice. The kiss that followed was brief, barely a brush, but it sealed something neither of them could name. The preacher nodded and mumbled, "That'll do," before stepping away with a rustle of his robes. Outside, Beller squinted against the sun. The station still loomed behind them, a reminder of how quickly life could change in the blink of a train whistle. Boone offered her his hand again, and she took it, noticing the calluses. Honest hands, rough from work, not from cruelty. They climbed into the wagon. Boone's eldest helped her settle in, surprisingly gentle for a boy raised in dirt and silence. Belle-Ear felt the weight of stares from behind her as they rolled out of town. Folk watching, judging, whispering words like desperate and foolish. She kept her gaze ahead. The road north twisted through dry grasslands and clusters of birch, the wind curling through yellowing leaves. Boone didn't speak for a long while. The boys napped against each other in the back, and Beller watched the sky change from blue to gold. "You still breathing over there?" Boone asked after some time. "I think so. You did good back there." "I didn't faint, if that's what you mean." He chuckled. "That too." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. Just open space, waiting to be filled. Boone let the reins slacken slightly, guiding the mules up a ridge where the land opened wide into endless prairie. Bellstar shifted. "You said you lost your wife. 2 winters passed. Flu came through like fire. Took half the town. Took her fast. I'm sorry. She was kind. Never raised her voice even when I deserved it. He glanced at her. You don't have to be her bell star. I didn't marry you to fill a hole. Why did you marry me? He considered that because I needed someone strong enough to carry more than just water buckets. Someone who wouldn't wilt the first time the world turned mean. You think I'm strong? I think you've been standing on cracked ground so long you don't realize it's you holding the roof up. Bellstar didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't. But her eyes stung in the wind and not from dust. The sun dipped lower and Boone pointed toward a hill where a crooked fence cut across a slope. That's home. The cabin wasn't much weather-beaten with a roof patched in too many colors of wood and a porch that sagged slightly to the right. Chickens scattered as they pulled in, and a tired dog barked twice before recognizing the wagon. Inside, it smelled of pine soap, smoke, and bread gone slightly stale. Bellier's trunk was placed by the wall. A rocker creaked in the corner. She stepped inside slowly, feeling like an intruder in a life that wasn't hers. Boone showed her where the water was kept, the kettle, the matches, the hooks on the wall for her coat. His movements were natural, unhurried. He was a man used to sharing space with ghosts. That night, they ate beans and cornbread by firelight. Boone's boys, Emmett and Samuel, sat close to the hearth. Beller watched them from across the table, unsure of her place. When she tried to take their plates to wash, Samuel flinched. I won't hurt you, she said softly. Boone glanced up. They ain't used to kindness yet. Give them time. I'm not their mother. No, but they'll learn what your voice means soon enough. Later, Boone offered her the bed. I'll take the chair, he said, already grabbing a blanket. We just got married, she said, cautious. Doesn't mean I get to demand more than you're ready to give. Bellstar nodded. That was the first time her heart truly relaxed. The days that followed were raw and real. Bellstar learned to gather eggs from hens that pecked like old maids. She chopped vegetables, mended shirts, and swept the floor while Samuel trailed her saying nothing. At night, she read from her old prayer book aloud, and Boone listened with his eyes closed, not praying, just present. One morning, while hanging clothes on the line, she heard laughter from the barn. Iamte was grinning, mud on his cheeks as Beller tried to catch a runaway goat. Boone stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with a lopsided smile. She likes you, Emmett said, pointing at the goat. I must smell like her cousin. Bellstar huffed, catching her breath. Boone approached. You're doing better than most would. They ain't easy animals. Neither am I. Boone looked at her. Really looked good. That night, as the wind howled through the chinks in the wall, Beller found herself awake while the rest slept. She walked onto the porch in her shawl and stared up at the stars. The land was quiet, holding its breath. Boone joined her, boots light against the boards. You miss the city, he asked. I miss knowing what comes next. He nodded. Out here we just keep moving one fence post at a time. Bellstar hesitated. I keep thinking he might show up. The man who left me at the station. What if he does? Boone leaned on the rail. Then he'll see what he lost and I'll make sure he doesn't forget it. Bellstar looked at him. You don't even know what I'm worth. Boone's voice was steady. No, but I see how your hands never stop. How the boy started sleeping through the night again. How my house don't feel hollow anymore. Her throat tightened. She blinked quickly then laughed softly. That's a lot for a fat woman with a broken trunk. He stepped closer. It's not the weight that mattered. It was the way you carried it. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the air shifted between them, charged, uncertain. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, Boone said, voice low. But I won't stand by if someone tries to take what's mine. Bellstar didn't reply, but she leaned against the railing beside him, shoulder to shoulder, watching the stars until the cold chased them back inside. And deep down in a place she didn't quite understand yet, Bellstar knew something in her had begun to change. Not because she was finally chosen, but because for the first time she had chosen back. The frost came early that year. Bellier woke one morning to find the windows kissed with ice, delicate crystals blooming in the corners like lace work. She wrapped herself in her shawl and moved to the stove, feeding it wood and coaxing the flames to life. Outside, The wind howled across the plains, fierce and biting. Boone was already up, splitting logs behind the barn with that quiet intensity she'd grown to recognize. The boys were still tangled in their quilts, breath fogging softly above their mouths. Bellstar poured hot water into the tin basin and washed her face. As she caught her reflection in the rippling surface, she noticed something strange. She looked different, not thinner, not softer, but grounded, like the land had begun to shape her into something rooted. Later that morning, Boone returned with a letter in his hand, creased and mud-spotted. He held it out like it might burn. Bellstar dried her hands on her apron before taking it. The handwriting was sharp and arrogant. To Bellstar Mayfield, I was told you went through with the marriage, that you dared to take another man's place while wearing the title that should have been mine. You'll regret that. I'm coming. The signature, though, slashed with haste, was unmistakable. Langley Carver. The name made her stomach twist. She hadn't heard from him since the day she'd stepped off that train and found only silence. Now, suddenly, he remembered she existed. Bellstar read it again. Her lips pressed into a hard line. She folded the letter slowly and precisely, then handed it back to Boone. Well, she said, voice steady. The rat wants his cheese. Boone didn't smile. He knows where we are. He'll come with fists or lawyers. He'll find me with a rifle. Boone sat down at the table, rubbing the edge of the letter with his thumb. If he tries to lay claim, we'll have to be ready. He doesn't have a claim. Her voice was sharp now. He left me. Left me to rot. That letter is the sound of a man realizing someone else found value in what he threw away. Boone nodded. Still, I'd rather he didn't show up here thinking this land's full of sheep. Then we show him the wolves. For days after, Boone worked like a man bracing for a flood. He fixed the fencing, sharpened every blade, oiled his rifle until it gleamed. Bellstar trained herself, too, not with weapons, but with will. She made sure the boys knew how to keep quiet if danger came. She kept her eyes on the horizon when hanging laundry, her ears tuned to hoof beatots. The tension seeped into everything, even the air they breathed. Bellist Star found herself flinching at every knock, every distant shout from the road. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in reds and purples, Boone handed her a revolver. It was small, nestled into her palm like a secret. You don't have to fire it, he said. Just knowing it's there might be enough. Bellstar stared at it. I've never held a gun before. Well, now you have, she nodded. I don't want to shoot anyone. Neither do I. But I'll do it, she said, her voice low. If he thinks he can take me back like property. Boone's eyes met hers. He won't get close enough to try. The storm broke the next afternoon. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, long before the sound of hooves reached the house. Bellstar was tending to the stew pot when Boone stiffened at the window. Riders, he muttered. He stepped outside with his rifle slung across his back. Bellstar followed, revolver tucked under her apron. EMTT and Samuel watched from the barn loft, instructed to stay silent and still. 3 men rode toward the house. Langley Carver was at the front, sitting tall in his saddle like a man auditioning for a portrait. His black coat flared in the wind. His face, though still sharp and clean-shaven, had the pale smugness of someone who'd never labored a day in his life. The other 2 were thicker, hired fists without names. Boone stood at the fence. You've got about 10 seconds to say your piece, he called. Langley dismounted slowly, adjusting his gloves. You must be the man who picked up my leftovers. Bellstar's fingers twitched. Boone didn't rise to the insult. You've got no business here. I've got all the business in the world, Langley replied, stepping forward. That woman was promised to me. She arrived with the intent to wed. I paid for the passage. That makes her mine. Bellstar stepped up beside Boone chin high. You're not owed anything but the shame you left behind. Langley's smile was tight. You think that ring means anything? There was no license. No papers filed. She's still legally free. Then we'll file the damn papers, Boone said coldly. Langley's gaze flicked to Beller. You really think you belong here? Out in the dirt with these half-wild children and a man who reeks of cowhide. You were meant for better. Bellstar laughed. It startled even herself. I was meant for freedom. And I found it the day you didn't show up. Langley's face twisted. Boone shifted his stance. You want to test the rest of this conversation with a bullet? Or are you smart enough to leave with your pride mostly intact? One of Langley's men reached for his gun. Bellstar raised hers first. The click of her hammer pulling back rang sharp in the air. Langley's man froze. I may not know how to aim yet, Bellstar said, her voice clear. But at this range, I don't have to. Boone moved closer to her, his presence as shield. You done? He asked Langley. Langley's nostrils flared, but his men were hesitating. The show of defiance had stolen whatever dominance he planned to wield. I'll be back, he hissed. With law, with men. You won't be able to hide behind your barn and your woman forever. You can bring a whole army, Bellstar said, lowering her gun. But you'll still find me standing. Langley didn't reply. He turned sharply and mounted. His men followed slower, wary now. The dust trailed behind them like shame. Boone watched until they disappeared. Bellstar's hands shook as she holstered the revolver. He looked at her. You all right? No, but you're still standing. I am. He reached out, brushing his fingers along her sleeve. You didn't just stand, Bellstar. You held the line. She laughed again, this time softer. I'll need practice. My aim was terrible. Next time we'll shoot bottles. That night, they ate in silence, not from fear, but from the kind of exhaustion that comes after reclaiming something stolen. The boys leaned against Beller's sides as she read from her prayer book again. Boone watched her, and for the first time since the wedding, he didn't see a woman abandoned. He saw the one who stayed, the one who stood, and who, despite everything, was starting to believe she deserved to. Snow fell in soft, silent drifts over the Carter homestead. It blanketed the barn roof, softened the jagged fence, posts, and turned the ragged prairie into something almost peaceful. The world was hushed beneath its weight as though holding its breath. Bellstar stood at the kitchen window with a mug of weak coffee between her hands, watching Boone shovel a path through the powder. He moved slow this morning, his shoulders still stiff from the last storm, but his movements were steady. Sure. Inside, the boys were sprawled out by the hearth, drawing in the soot on the stone with sticks. Samuel had sketched something that vaguely resembled their goat. Bellstar smiled faintly. There were days she still struggled to believe all this was hers. Not the land, not the house, but the quiet, the place where she no longer had to defend her right to be loved, the place where the air no longer buzzed with shame. She ran a hand over the growing pile of books on the side table. A traveling bookseller had come through the town a week prior, and Beller had bartered for primers and a hymn nil. Now, 3 neighboring children came by every Sunday, tracking in snow and grins, eager to learn their letters from the woman who had once been left on a bench like luggage. Boone stepped inside, stamping off snow. He hung up his coat and came to kiss her cheek without a word. He always kissed her now every morning. Habit perhaps, but it never felt routine. His lips lingered. He still saw her every day like it was the first. The wind shifted, whistling sharp through the eaves. Bellstar's fingers tightened around her mug. Boone noticed. You all right? She nodded. Just that time of year, I suppose. He knew what she meant. It had been nearly a year since the day she arrived. Since the train, the letter, the rushed vows in a crooked chapel. A year since she had been claimed by a stranger and rebuilt herself inside his home. They sat together in the afternoon, rocking gently on the porch. The boys raced up and down the snow-tracked path, tossing handfuls at each other with wild shouts. Boone's arm slid behind Bellstar's back. She leaned into it, breathing in the scent of pine and leather. Then came the rider, a single figure on a dark horse. No cloud of dust. No companions, just one man black against the white. Boone stood first. Inside, he said calmly, eyes never leaving the silhouette. Bellstar didn't argue. She herded the boys into the cabin and latched the door, but she didn't stay behind it. She watched through the window as Boone stepped off the porch with his rifle tucked low against his leg. The man dismounted with care. His coat flared as he moved. It was Langley. His hat brim was crusted with frost. His cheeks red from the wind, but his eyes were still cold. "I came alone," he called. "I figured you'd prefer that." Boone said nothing. Langley took a step forward slow. "I thought I'd be the one who made her into something." "You thought wrong." Langley gave a small bitter laugh. "And yet you did it. You married her. Built something out here." Boone remained still. Langley glanced toward the house. "She's stronger than I remembered. When I saw her sitting at that station, I thought she'd give up. Find a train back east. Fade. She grew roots instead." Boone replied. Langley's eyes flicked back. "And she's got you to thank for that. She owes me nothing." There was a silence between them, heavy with words unsaid. Langley sighed. "I didn't come to take her. I know that ship sailed. I just wanted to see what kind of man replaced me." "You weren't replaced," Boone said. "You were erased." Langley bristled. But the fight had gone out of him. "You'll leave now," Boone said. "And not just from this land, from her story." "I already did," Langley said, voice low. Bellstar opened the door. Then her shawl whipped in the wind, but she stood tall. "If you're here to apologize, save your breath." Langley looked at her. For the first time the mask cracked. "I'm not sorry for leaving," he said. "But I'm sorry I never saw what was in front of me." Bellstar's gaze didn't soften. "I'm not," he nodded, turned, and climbed back onto his horse. No dramatic exit, just the crunch of hooves over frozen ground. Boone returned to the porch, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Bellstar reached for his hand. "You didn't have to come out," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. "I wanted him to see." Boone looked at her. "See what?" "That I didn't disappear. That I grew. That I became." He nodded slowly. "You did." That night, the fire burned long into the quiet hours. EMTT and Samuel fell asleep against Bellstar's sides as Boone whittle-led a small toy horse near the hearth. Bellstar looked down at the boys, both safe and warm, and knew there was no going back. Not for any of them. Boone set the carving aside and came to sit beside her. They didn't speak for a long while. The wind howled outside, but inside there was only the creak of the rocker and the soft rhythmic breaths of children. "I love you," Boone said quietly without ceremony. Bellstar turned to him. "You do." He nodded. "I didn't know it until I thought about what I'd do if he tried to take you. Not fight, not shoot, just live in a world without you in it. And that made me feel hollow." She smiled. "I was afraid to say it first. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Bellstar reached up, touched his face. "I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Boone kissed her, not briefly this time. Not polite. A kiss that said he knew every scar she carried, every shame once branded into her skin. And none of it mattered. She was not a fat woman he took in out of kindness. She was not a charity. She was not a placeholder. She was his wife, his partner, the mother of his boys, and the beating heart of their home. Outside the snow deepened, the land slept. But inside the Carter cabin, beneath a patched roof, and beside a flickering fire, love had rooted itself deep into the frozen ground, unmoving, unashamed, and here to stay.